hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, adventurers. On today's podcast, I have Dr. Shawna Pandya. She is a Canadian physician, scientist, astronaut candidate, program graduate with the International Institute for the Astronautical Sciences, the IIAS, and Project PoSSUM, aquanaut, speaker, martial artist, advanced diver, skydiver, pilot in training, and VP of Immersive Medicine with Luxsonic Technologies and Fellow at the Explorers Club. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome Dr. Shawna Pandya.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on here. And I'm so excited to learn about your journey. In terms of Explorer, you definitely waving flag of Explorer, of all the different things that you've done. Can you talk to me first a little bit about the Explorers Club? And then I want to back into how you got on this wild journey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the Explorers Club is exactly what it sounds like. It's been around for at least 100 years. And it's, people who are interested in pushing the boundaries, going where humans hadn't gone before, or studying things that hadn't been studied before in these locales. And that's an important distinction. So to be a member of the Explorers Club, you either come in as a fellow or a member. And it's not that just you visit these places, because that's tourism, but what have you done to increase our of that area? What have you published? And so I was lucky enough to be inducted into the Explorers Club as a fellow, based on my research and publications in the space and astronautics world. And the people you meet are incredible. You can be at a single table and someone will have done a paleontological dig in South America. Someone will have been at the South Pole. Someone will be talking about what they're working on in space research. Someone will have been caving, and it's just inspiration of what is out there, what people are working on, and might spark the next expedition that we decide to embark upon.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, it sounds like the place that you've always wanted to go. Like it's what I imagine as a kid is behind the room, behind the corner. It's the place where all the cool people are hanging out, like all of the adults that are having a great time without you because you're too young to have adventures. I think that sounds like a wonderful club to be part of, and the stories that are probably told are incredible. Have you always been an explorer, or what was the genesis that kicked you off into getting into this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was always a really ambitious kid, and I think I like to joke that maybe I just became progressively less ambitious as I grew up. And so the story goes that, when I was a 4-year-old, I wanted to be a transformer and fight crime. And then I realized, well, I'm not a robot. So, okay, that kibosh that plan. So then I thought, okay, I'll be a superhero. And then I realized, okay, well, that's not there's no superhero school you can go to. So then I thought, okay, let me become a billionaire. So by this time I'd grown up a little. I was 7 years old, and I thought, let me use my wealth to solve all the world's problems. And then I realized, okay, well, there's no degree in billionaireology. So what's the next boundary pushing, next most amazing thing? And I thought, okay, I want to be an astronaut. And, I grew up in the 90s. I grew up when the second ever Canadian astronaut selection was taking place. I'm a Canadian by background. This is where I grew up. And then I also was inspired by the first female Canadian astronaut, Dr. Roberta Bonder, in space. And I thought, okay, that's it. That's my path. She's Canadian. I'm Canadian. She's female. I'm female. So now all I need to do is go be a neuroscientist, physician, and astronaut. Boom, it's done. And that's actually literally what set me on the path towards studying my degree in neuroscience, going to medical school, and then merging space and space medicine in my career along the way.
Wow. I like how you're like, oh, I just need to. It's a simple sentence that's backed by years, if not decades, of hard work along the way.
I played the long game. Yeah, as a kid, it's sort of like, okay, just these 3 things, no big deal.
That's it, no big deal. What's awesome about that too is so how old were you when you found about her? I mean, can you say her name again?
Dr. Roberta Bonder.
Roberta Bonder. And how old were you when you came across her materials and knew what she was about?
So this was early 90s, so I would have been about 8 at that point. And then, from there it was game on. It's like, okay, well, this is exciting. People go into space. And, the other part of that was kind of having the hands-on experience to back it up. So Dr. Bonder was a Girl Guide, and I was also a Girl Guide. I did lots of camping, lots of survival camps throughout education. In junior high, I did a lot of camping with my family. And the coolest part of that is you get to see all of these amazing night skies where you're away from the city lights and these, glittering stars just leap out at you. And you're like, wow, I want to be amongst those. People go there. And, that really also helps solidify that, holy cow, something amazing, that's something amazing to work towards.
100%. And there's something about when you get out into the wild and you connect with nature, you kind of feel both connected and super small. You have those combinations of that stuff. I just recently, God, it was like 2-3 months ago, I got to go to the Keck Observatory in Hawaii.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
New moon, right up at the top. And then so I've got these photos that are just, you just look at it and you're like, wow, you don't really understand how grand the universe is until you can actually get a clear view of it. That will it changes. I think, and I don't know if this is right, because I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have a thought about this I'd love to run across you called, what is awe? What is awe? And this is just my own personal interpretation of awe that I kind of came across, was whenever a computer is trying to run graphics on a computer, you have this, it's running the graphics as a visual, right? And I think, at least visually speaking, when you go from a little tunnel and then you go into the Yosemite Mountains, you look at all that beauty, or you come out underneath a camp and you look at all that you look at the sky and you see the thousands and millions and millions of stars. Your brain's trying to process all that beauty at one time, and your brain goes, you're just overwhelmed at that sensations. And so I think awe is a rendering issue. I could be completely off point, but I wanted to get your takes on it as an actual neuroscientist.
I would be really curious to see, if you could image someone's brain in real time, if you could perform a fMRI, a functional MRI of someone's brain, and see what parts of the brain light up, when they're experiencing that awe, that would be really cool. And, also track which neurotransmitters are involved with that, because we know, for example, there's reward neurotransmitters like dopamine, there's pleasure neurotransmitters as well. And it would be kind of cool to see what the excitation pathways are doing when you're looking at something that's awe-inspiring. That would be a cool study.
I would be, super cool. What a great one to be a part of. You're just constantly getting your mind blown as an experiment,
Yeah, the science of awe, hey?
Yeah. Incredible. So I love this, and I love the fact that, because you had a moment where you had a model, and the model was like, okay, I want to be like her, scientist, astronaut, a crazy, and then you started modeling that behavior, and then you started exploring the wilds, and you started feeling that love and that passion along the way. Can you talk to me about your journey through there and getting the degrees and everything that you're going, along the path, going through these journeys and actually leveling up? I saw you have a combination of both nature and high technologies. What is the commonality between all of these things that keeps your interests?
Yeah, I think it's always about pushing the limits, whether you're, climbing up a mountain in a Mars simulation, when you're at the Mars Desert Research Station and you're climbing these amazing sprawling vistas, you're living real life on fake Mars. You're pretty much may as well be living on Mars. And, myself, when we were living in that simulation, myself and my EVA or exploration buddy, we would just climb the highest peaks. So we could be, if we didn't do that, if we didn't push our own limits, we wouldn't know the paths that lay to be explored next. And it's the same reason we perform research. It's the same reason that we develop new technologies, because it's sort of, where can I go with this? And I think that's the common thread that links the two.
So it's pushing the limits, the discovery, but it's also discovering the world, but also discovering yourself. And
also saying, where can I go next with this? What if I did this? What if, I found this out? What could I do with that knowledge?
Can you talk to me about a time where it might have been a challenge for you to try to overcome something, but then by pushing through, you got the reward? Because what you're saying, pushing through the limits is a wonderful thing. But how did that get hard coded into your psyche?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I would say that I think that's kind of one of my innate traits. It's not that I'm smarter or more talented than anyone else. I think I just don't give up. I've had a certain stick-to-itiveness ever since I was a kid. And, I would also have ambition to back that up. When I was 10, I would sat down and made a list of things that I had yet to do in my life and, the things I wanted to achieve. And, for example, one of those was getting a black belt in something. And then by the time I was 15, I was like, hey, I haven't done anything with that. Time to, pick up the pace. And then that's when I joined Taekwondo. And one of the core tenets of Taekwondo is that indomitable spirit of always picking yourself back up. Of you can get knocked down 8 times, but you better get up 9, right? So I think it was a part of something that was always innate and to me, and then that was reinforced through various life experiences like martial arts.
So you were making a list as a kid of the things you haven't done yet, and you're like, "Hey, man, time's a ticking. I got to get on the ball here. I'm slipping. I'm not an astronaut yet. I got to get ahead of things, or a black belt yet in these situations," which is unusual and awesome. With that, and you're looking at that, there's got to be times, because a lot of this is involving a lot of delayed gratification. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I mean, there's a lot of young boys and girls who are like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. But that path is not, you talk about this, I'm playing the long game, right? You talk about you being able to push through the limits and being able to actually have that. Can you talk to me about kind of what is the mindset that happens for you to be able to endure past the point of just when the novelty of the idea wears off?
Yeah, that's a two-pronged question, I think, and it's a really good one. I think the first part of that is when you're in medicine, playing the long game is really ingrained into you, because it's really interesting to see how far everyone who's in grade 12 has good grades, like science, is told to go into medicine. At least that's the way it was when I was growing up. And then I'm going to go be a cardiovascular surgeon, to I don't have to do med school, or, I don't need to be a subspecialist surgeon. That resilience really gets tested as you go through years and years of schooling. So that's the one part of it. And then the other part of it is, you couldn't do this, whether it's pursuing astronautics, whether it's pursuing medicine, if you didn't love the grind in between. And it's not always fun. I know that some of our military friends say embrace the suck, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to embrace, the hard days, whether when you're a medical student and you've been up for 30 hours straight and, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. But the other part of it is loving, the exploration and the discovery that comes with doing hard things. And with the space world, every single thing that I do, whether it's going for a pilot's license or a skydiving license, or organizing an expedition to the bottom of the sea and living there as aquanauts, you love that stuff. You love the teammates you work with. You're surrounded by amazing people. And at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying that journey at every step of the way, then maybe it's time to recalibrate and say, is this kind of where we?
There's several questions popped up in my head when you were saying that. Living at the have you lived at the bottom of the sea?
Yeah, so I got my aquanaut designation on the 2019 Neptune mission. So this, in everything, as I'm sure your listeners are learning, everything in space and medicine and exploration is an acronym. And Neptune stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration. And so when I say bottom of the sea, we lived 20 feet underwater in a habitat. So not, at the Marianas Trench, that would be a little bit different. But we were still in saturation for the period of those 5 days. And we didn't surface till day 5 of that mission. And we lived and worked as a remote crew. We performed science related to physiology, psychology. We tested VR underwater. We tested VR medical suites underwater, and, did remote teleconsultations with physicians in Canada. It was a blast. It was so much fun.
That sounds awesome. Kind of sounds like a vacation a little bit. Sounds like a unique destination on Airbnb. personally, with a bunch of awesome science work. In terms of the VR, because I'm a VR developer and I build and design things like that. What were you testing out, like in terms of like underwater virtual reality applications? Like, can you talk me through a little bit of that?
Yeah, that's this is kind of the origin story of one of the things you mentioned in my bio. So you mentioned I'm the VP of Immersive Medicine with Luxsonic Technologies, and this was the whole origin story. So when we were reaching out to collaborators and co-investigators to see what kind of science and what kind of technologies we could test on this aquanaut mission, we talked to the CEO of Luxsonic, and they had the world's only virtual reality-based radiology reading room. And so, as you can imagine, in austere, remote, rural, isolated environments, whether you're talking about a remote town in Canada or whether you're talking about space, being able to have, this portable reading room where you don't need this $30,000 setup with high-resolution monitors to go through your diagnostic imaging is incredibly useful. And then if you're able to collaborate with a specialist to review complicated imaging, so much the better. And so I was the crew medical officer on that aquanaut mission. And what I did was I actually met with the head of radiology in Saskatoon, Canada, in this collaborative virtual reality space, 4,600 kilometers of distance between us, but we were still able to review the imaging of a simulated trauma patient. And the whole idea was, using that proof of concept, we were able to say, well, hey, maybe this also has applications for astronauts on the space station or on the moon, where there is a time delay, but it's only 2 seconds. And so that was the start of it. And then actually we managed to take that same headset and that same virtual reality radiology room, so we call it CVERT. We were able to take that on parabolic flight on the Vomit Comet a week later and fly it in 0G. So it was a really awesome week. And then coming back to the origin story of how I got into medicine and VR and using immersive technologies for education in austere environments, that was the beginning of my introduction to the company. And I came on board since to help further develop this and other technology suites for exactly the type of user, whether it's someone in COVID who doesn't have access to their traditional physical learning space, or whether it's an astronaut in space who needs to practice medical procedures in VR.
Yeah, that's great. And you're right. The use cases for virtual reality are things that are generally, when you're talking about training, is things that are rare, things that are risky, things that are expensive, things that are dangerous, which basically involves everything up in space, and everything below the water, because all that stuff is either it's rare, it's risky, it's dangerous, it's edge cases, which is a wonderful use case. So then what you're allowing people to do is you can have that remote collaboration so that you can see what's going on with the x-rays, and then you're talking about getting virtually trained to do surgeries, which I think is not going to be as good as doing it in person, but way better than a book, way better than trying to read about a surgery and trying to perform it versus actually seeing it and that kind of stuff. So I think that's some awesome use cases. And are you so then the roadmap for that is to kind of enable people with a suite of tools to say, hey, you're in a unique location. Use this to be able to solve a complex medical situation. Is that what that is for?
Yeah, and so to clarify, we don't focus on surgery because there's other groups out there doing that. We focus on other procedures. So imagine that you, for example, going back to the space case, imagine that you are the crew medical officer and you first learned to put an IV in on Earth, and then the next time you're called upon to use that skill is 6 months later. If you haven't practiced it, you're going to make your poor patient look like a pincushion. So imagine you're able to build that muscle memory in VR, and it's exactly what you said. You get to retire that risk by not practicing on a patient. You get to practice the steps of that procedure. You get to review how you did on that procedure, and then we also have data saying that there's actually cost savings, better memory retention, better learner confidence when you're using immersive. So there's the science to back it up.
That's awesome. Is there anything you haven't done yet that's still on your bucket list?
Every day, with how amazing this planet is, with how many new discoveries we make, with how many technologies are out there, the bucket list just grows. So definitely going to space is next on my bucket list. I absolutely want to go. I want to go there as a scientist. I want to go there to make a lasting contribution to our body of knowledge when it comes to exploration and research. But the more, the more I become part of the exploration world, there's so much on Earth as well that I want to do. And my love of ocean exploration really grew during that aquanaut mission. I was also lucky to go down to Aquarius Space, which is another underwater research lab. This is where NASA runs its NEMO missions, so NASA Extreme Environment Missions Operations. It's also, both of these places are in the Florida Keys. The Aquarius Reef Base is 13 miles from the place we did our aquanaut mission at the Jules Undersea Lodge. And going through these sojourns, these visits to these incredible places, you learn about both how vast and amazing our oceans are. To the fact that blows my mind is, to date, we've only mapped 5% of the oceans. 95% remains unmapped, and we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the what our oceans contain. We know that we're discovering new species all the time. We know that they look like aliens. If you ever see like a rainbow octopus, holy cow, they're aliens and they're here on Earth. They're amazing. But we also know that we have a duty to conserve these environments because they're so critical to the health of our planet. We know that we're in a climate crisis, and we know things like coral reefs are often the first signals to, hey, our oceans are in danger. So that, coming back to that bucket list, continued exploration, ocean exploration, and then definitely polar exploration. I haven't been down to either pole yet, so that would be fun.
I haven't gotten to that. I got to go to the it's called End of the World, Ushuaia. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like no. Right before there. Oh yeah. I have a friend of mine who does like wild survivals. I was on a German TV show, and we got to go down to like what's called End of the World, which is the last airport right before Antarctica. And so it was right down there, and it was amazing because there's a place called Ushuaia because it's called, and it's the last spot, and there's like a little explorer's lodge that we were in from like the 1900s, where you could tell it's where everyone would like pack up and do things and kind of like, and we were hanging out. It was like original. I was like, wow, I could imagine all the original explorers that were coming here that were trying to survive and make things happen. And we feel so, we are very lucky right now with the technologies that we have, that we can map things, right? We can go onto Google Earth and we can look at things, we can check things out. I can go to Tokyo and go run around as Google Maps and things versus like old school explorers. They were cutting through the forest to try to find the ways and trying to uncover, what's this? Can I eat it? Will it kill me? I don't know. There's all these unique things. And that still, it feels really mapped right now, but you're right. We only got 5% of the ocean that we still got to go through and wade through and those types of things. When you're talking about exploring, and you said the last place you want to go up into or on your bucket list is into space, what's the likelihood in terms of the Elon Musk Mars mission, going to Mars? Like, at what point would you feel comfortable going to Mars, or would you ever feel comfortable going to Mars to explore?
Absolutely. I'm always happy to go to any place you want to send me to, as long as you show me you have a plan, that you've identified the risks, you have a plan to get me back, and that you have a plan to, not only identify, but mitigate the risks. So right now we know that space is trying to kill us. Mars is trying to kill us. It's a combination of decompensation and deconditioning in microgravity. It's the lunar dust that the Apollo astronauts encountered on the moon. It's the increased radiation. It's the psychology of loneliness. It's having altered day-night cycles. On the ISS, you're going through sunset sunrise cycle every 90 minutes, right? There's a lot to contend with. And then, when you're on Mars, you're 6 to 9 months away from the nearest hospital. So you also have to contend with that. So there's a lot that's trying to kill you up in space. And so if you're proposing to send me or anyone to a place, you better have a plan to mitigate all of those risks as well as bring me back.
It's not like, well, it's going to roll the dice. Look, it's just, we're going to roll the dice. We'll figure it out. It'll be okay. No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and that's a question. Well, when you talk about that, I'm actually really curious from your perspective on, you said get a plan. So my guess is since you are constantly going to the wild, what would be like you talk about making a plan. If you're going to formulate going into an unknown area, and you're talking about mitigating risk, if people are going to be doing these explorer type adventure things, how do they prep up to go onto the adventure?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was going to say is there's a couple of famous quotes from some of the astronauts is that, Chris Hadfield has famously said, no astronaut goes into a launch with their fingers crossed saying, I hope this is going to be okay. And then David Saint-Jacques, another Canadian astronaut, has said, astronauts are famously chicken. We shy away from risk. Right. And so it's the same thing if you're going into an austere environment. You want to know, first of all, what are the hazards of this environment? What is going to kill you? What's most likely to kill you? How do I retire that risk? How do I pack for that risk? And what are my packing constraints, right? So, whether you're talking about going to the moon or whether you're talking about going on a jungle expedition, well, in a jungle, it's going to be, the heat. It's going to be poisonous insects. It's going to be venomous plants that come after you. But you also need to worry about, the Maslow's hierarchy of survival, like the food, water, shelter, right? And then what are your constraints? Do you have a pack animal that's going to carry your stuff for you? Or is it everything that you bring with you on your back? And if that's the case, knowing that maybe despite being this environment where heat is still an issue, is the most likely thing you're going to encounter still blisters, right? And then that helps you formulate an approach and a plan as to how you're going to what you're going to put into your medical kit. So it might be, extra rations, it might be painkillers, it might be blister band-aids, and then it may be a rare antidote in case you encounter a venomous caterpillar, right? And so you'll have an approach. So that's the first part of it. And then the second part of it is, what are your contingencies? What's your plan A, B, C, D, E? How are you going to evac? Are you going to carry a sat phone with you? All of these things are, you should be thinking about that at every step of the way, whether you're going underwater to live and work for 5 days, whether you're going to the remote jungle, whether you're going to space. And, that's exactly the approach that we took towards our Neptune mission. We had spreadsheets upon spreadsheets that we worked upon, for the better part of a year to help get this mission kick it off and well.
Wow. So when you're talking spreadsheets, because what I'm imagining is, and this design process of actually coming across these, okay, what's the scenario? Okay, what are the highest risks? Okay, how do we mitigate those risks in order? What are the constraints that we can have? What can we bring with us? What's our inventory? What does that look like? And then what I'm imagining you're doing is you're talking about spreadsheets. Are you thinking on spreadsheets, or do you get whiteboards up and you design it? Okay, we go into the jungles. A lion comes in, what do I do? How do you, is it literally just break down spreadsheets and scenarios inside spreadsheets? Is that what that looks like? Or is there another method for thinking on paper?
Yeah, every team is different. It's really how your team comes together and performs best. For us, we would have regular team meetings, and then we would take notes, and then we would assign tasks, and then we would say, okay, this is what the day-to-day schedule looks like. This is what the lead up looks like. This is who's arriving when. This is everyone's medical conditions to be aware of, such as allergies. There were lots of spreadsheets related to that. And it's just the end goal is you want to be prepared. You want to identify your unknowns, and you also want to start identifying blind spots that you might not even think of as unknowns. And the idea is you want to mitigate risk. And it's really interesting because, for example, if there's anyone who's an engineer or technical background out there, the way NASA approaches risk is through their risk matrix. And they actually have this table where on one axis you identify the likelihood of something occurring versus the consequence of something happening. And if it's very likely and very severe consequence, like it's mission ending if it happens, then you have to mitigate it before it goes on. So there's multiple models in which you would approach risk mitigation and planning. And it's just what works best for you, as well as your team, as well as your mission and objectives.
When you're going on these adventures, I'm sure there's a better term for that, but when you're going out into exploring, I'm sure it can go from very fun to very dangerous very quickly. Can you talk to me about a time that you might have been, you felt like your life was threatened, seemingly so or not?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, both from being a crew medical officer and being a commander, is read the room. Your level of comfort with risk may not always be everyone's level of comfort and risk. And so, for example, there have been situations where, someone was close to hyperventilating or being claustrophobic. And then, myself and the other physician would look at and say, hey, we're actually seeing you calming down. We're okay with continuing. We don't need to abort. We don't need to head back to base. And then, we're happy to continue on. We're seeing that their vital signs are fine. And then in the debrief afterwards, someone actually has to spell it out for us, saying that just because you guys are comfortable with it, because you guys are seeing people dying in the emergency room all the time, you see people who are sick, doesn't mean that that's normal, and it's not necessarily what the entire team is comfortable with. And that was, a really honest and important lesson to learn. And in that position, being a physician and a commander, it's sort of a very humbling, because you have to be very, very team-based and team-oriented. And I think that's something that I've taken away with me from my austere environment expeditions.
Well, I mean, in that situation where you have to lead people and you have to guide them through a situation where maybe they don't feel necessarily comfortable, right? I mean, is it a thing where it's you're talking about reading the room, but one is there is a perceived danger and then there's actual danger, right? There's people that are just they're concerned because they're concerned, but it's not actually, I don't want to say valid, but it's not actually the risk isn't really there. Have you had to have a situation where you've had to rally the troops with something inspirational or some sort of way where you do have to get the team to do something that they don't necessarily want to do, but it's for the best of the mission?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, every mission's different. The personalities that come to every mission is different. And, I've been on expeditions where, everyone is type AAA and, your challenge is kind of holding them back so they have enough left in the tank to go for the next day and the day after that. And, on some missions, we've called that the sled dog mentality, because we're just happiest when we're working really hard. And I've been on expeditions when people may have done better with better preparation, or may have said, oh, hey, I have a history of claustrophobia and not doing well with tight confines and small groups. And you're thinking to yourself, why are you here? And then, just trying to realize, well, we're here now. We can't do anything about it other than make you as comfortable as possible, push you to your limit a little bit, but also back down when, you're saying, that you've had enough. And it's really the psychological aspect is not to be underestimated, because even the perceived danger, can lead to a full-blown panic attack. It can have an impact on crew morale. And if you're 2 days into your mission and, you're being perceived as not taking your crew seriously, well, then it's just going to make for a miserable mission. You're going to lose respect. No one's going to listen to you. And so, you really have to be evolving at all times. And if you're in a position of leadership, you really have to be humble and open about your mistakes, because otherwise, your mistakes are on display for all to see. And if you're not being honest about it, it's apparent. And then you're really going to lose faith when you really need the trust of your team.
Yeah. Is there, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, because it's a balance between, it's like, it's not black or white. It's not, hammer or something else. It's finding that balance and knowing the nuances to kind of, to sit in that pocket. Do you have, when you're looking at teams, when you're looking at dynamics, are there team dynamics you're looking for? Are there red flags you're looking for? Because you're talking about a lot of this team and as a leader, but when you're formulating teams and like that, what are you really looking for a good team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple parts to this. So I think one of the biggest thing is preparation. So I think we've all heard that adage of, forming, norming, storming, and then performing. And that's so true, because I've been brought into expeditions at the last minute, maybe 3 weeks beforehand, where, you have to learn the team dynamics. You have to learn what has been planned, what hasn't been planned, versus I've been in expeditions where we had 8-month lead up time to prepare for everything, to, iron out those, any personality clashes. And so preparation is key to it. And I think if I would almost have a hypothesis that with enough lead time, you have enough time before you're in the austere environment, before you're on that X, to actually address kinks ahead of time. That being said, there's crews and expeditions that I have really awesome rapport with, that we still talk every day to this, they're like family. And it's just that, everyone is mission driven. They're very smart. They're very accomplished. They want to get work done, but they're just fun to be around. They have the same goals that you do. You all have the same shared mental model of what your mission looks like. And so if you're giving me the luxury of, picking who my crew is, it's going to be those people who are hard workers, who are in it for the love of the game, but also want to have a little bit of fun while they're in this incredible environment.
That's awesome. Competent people that you like is a very important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a lot more succinct way of putting it.
No, it's wonderful. This is great. And is there anything you talk about, like if you give me enough time, I can hammer through enough people and we can figure this out. And you're talking about team formation, because some people, I know it's typical common for you, but like you're talking about the storming, forming, norming, forming teams, storming teams, which causes the ruckus, and then they normalize out and then they perform over time, right? That's kind of the phases of a team as you move through something. I just want to touch on, because some people may not know that, and I want to just touch on it. And I want to say, in terms of the storming to norming part of the actual connections, do you have any leadership tactics or exercises or bonding activities or ways to kind of work through to make a more cohesive team?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think honestly the best way to kind of put all of everyone's flaws and fears on display is to have a stressful situation and see how you all react. But I mean, that's not ideal. And so ideally you'll have a pre-brief as well as a situation and exercise, and then a debrief. And so you can reinforce what went well and, create future, reinforce those patterns of performance in the future, and then also try to improve on things that didn't go so well. But even just, having talking out, making sure everyone feels heard, making sure that, if people have goals, that they want to share them, that they are sharing them. If they have fears, that they are sharing them. And I think one of the missions that I was commander of, what we all did is we shared at the very beginning, before going into this mission, we shared our roadmaps and our objectives for success. And we realized that, oh, hey, this is alike, this isn't, and we have to come together to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So that communication is really key.
Yeah, it's funny because you're smiling. Was there a certain story in your mind or an incident in your mind that came to mind when I was asking that question? And it was like, the never let a good crisis go to waste, in the terms of letting a situation, so when you see, I don't want to say catastrophe, but when you see a situation pop up, right? Are you saying, oh, this is a good chance to test my team? Is there a certain situation you can talk about that and the lessons you learned from a specific? Yeah,
actually, now that you mention it, so one of the parts that you may have mentioned in my bio is I'm the lead instructor of the IIAS Operational Space Medicine course. And basically in this course, we take medical lay folks, so people who don't necessarily have a medical background, and we teach them to be a space medical MacGyver. So we teach them principles of austere environment medicine. We teach them principles of assessment, recognition, triage, and treatment. And so some of these people, like in one instance, we had a second-year medical student, which is awesome. In other instances, we had software developers and, military pilots. So people who are very, very driven and smart, but no medical background whatsoever. And, we would take them through these drills, and we would start with a simple trauma and then, up the game a little bit to a multi-trauma, polytrauma, and then do a night scenario and then a mass casualty. And I'm laughing because, these people really rose to the occasion. We would throw everything at them and stress them out, and they would really get into the scenario. And then when we would debrief, at the end of the day, they did what they had to do. And so kind of pushing them to their limits, but also keeping in mind where the limit is.
Yeah. Do you get some sort of pleasure from watching people stress out and then overcome those fears and grow? Is there
not sadism.
I'm not necessarily sadism, but there's a positive. I was trying to avoid the term sadism. And in my mind, it was like, okay, don't say that. But around the pleasure from seeing people overcome their fears and then grow from the things that they've overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much pride. There's so much pride in seeing people who, have this trepidation, and then they get into this scenario that's testing their limits. And that's true of the medical course, the space medicine course. It's true of any of the astronautics courses that we do with the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. So IIAS, we're testing spacesuits in zero G. We're testing spacesuits in the water. We're testing, we're creating underwater research labs. And, most of the time, by the time you've done several of these courses, where your comfort limit is, and you're here because you want more. But the first time you meet, a rookie who's just gone through ground school, and you're just watching them, build things up, you're there to build them up, but you're also there to help them, get over the trepidations and fears. And when you watch them graduate, you're like, yes, you did it. You're amazing. Welcome. So it's immense pride at that growth. And you see that anytime you're mentoring someone, and it's just like, holy cow, I am privileged enough to watch you rise to the occasion. That's awesome.
That's cool. And that's what I guess that was the word I was looking for, is a sense of pride that you get from watching someone grow and overcome their fears and feeling like you had a part of that. They did it, but you were in the ecosystem that helped them grow, which is really cool.
Exactly.
I love it. And so those situations where it's those freak out moments, do you have ways of keeping your cool under the pressure? Is there ways when everything's going wrong, there's the red lights flashing, the loud noises are happening, like, is there a way, like, how do you keep centered and be able to kind of and keep a level head as you move through those situations?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm smiling because one thing I've left out is, sometimes despite our best efforts, we don't have time to train it as a team. And, we have to deal with things as they come in. And 90% of my practice as a physician is in rural emergency rooms. And because I, work in so many different sites, I'm in a different city every weekend. I don't have time to I don't have the luxury of having built rapport with the nursing team. And so if something like a cardiac arrest comes in, it's like, okay, where all systems go. And then, we have to trust in our training. We have to trust in our teammates' training that they know what to do. But that being said, when things hit the fan, there's so many different ways to center yourself. And so for me, when a polytrauma comes in, you just go back to your basic instincts. And, in the traditional trauma teaching, it's ABC, airway, breathing, circulation, right? And there's various paradigms of that model. In the military, I think they use PMARCH or something like that. But it's always, this is the order of operations. This is what you have to secure first before you can go on to the next thing. In the piloting world, it's aviate, navigate, communicate, which you can argue is also applicable to running a code in medicine. You have to do what you have to do to keep the patient alive. You have to do what you have to do to keep your plane afloat. And then you have to figure out where you're going to next. And then you communicate that to everyone. And maybe some of those things are happening in tandem. And sometimes it's as simple as what my dad has told me when I was growing up is stop, take a breath, and then think, right? So there's so many ways. There's all these tools you have at your disposal, whether you're in medicine or aviation or just in life. And you always have more time to think and act than you actually may perceive.
That is a great and powerful lesson. You always have more time than you think you have in the moment, because that's it. But that falling back on that frameworks, on those patterns, on those situations, is like, okay, breathe. What's my training? What's my acronym that I need to use in the moment? Right? What do I need to pull out of the situation? I mean, those things are critical, because some people, one of the challenging bits, if you're in a situation where you're working with people that your life's on the line, you don't want someone's going to freak out and just run away, or they're going to, something's going to happen when they snap. And so knowing that people can perform well under pressure and they can fall in those situations, I think is invaluable. Knowing how to actually do it. Because I think part of this is there's a certain amount of confidence that I think you have because you've been in so many of these situations. You're like, okay, I got it. I know I'm gonna figure it out. I'm just gonna get it. And I think when people haven't been tested like that, they don't know, and so they don't have that experience. They don't have that confidence in themselves to be able to take, to sit in those situations uncomfortably. That's why when I was talking about, like, for some reason, whenever I bring up anything going completely wrong, you smile. And I just noticed in this conversation that every time we go into a situation where everything's wrong, everything's on fire, you're like. It's all good. I got it. Like, and so
you have to, right? Because, especially in COVID times, it's not just COVID, it's all of healthcare that's on fire. And so
Yeah.
even in these rural sites, I'm seeing way more volume than I ever would. I'm seeing way more sick patients. I just came off 72 hours this past weekend where it was actually nonstop for the 72 hours. And it's like, okay, well, this is the order of operations. This is the way it goes. This is the resources we have. And, if we have to triage the order in which things are done, so be it. But at the end of the day, we're going to make sure everyone gets out alive. We're going to make sure that everyone is still staying afloat. And then, at the end of the day, at some point, you're going to get a reprieve at some point. So there will be, you're always going to be okay. It's fine.
It's fine. 72 hours? Or 72 hours in a hospital? Is that what you're saying? Doing some sort of triage work, or is that what?
Yeah. So when you work rural, it's a little bit different than working in a tertiary major healthcare center. So if you're in a big city, you'll typically work 8 hours at a time. So when you're working rurally, you'll actually typically take on the entire weekend at a time. So, because I work everywhere, I've taken on everything from 8-hour shifts to 1 week of call at a time. And, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you'll sleep through the night. Sometimes you're going nonstop for, the better part of 60, 70 hours. And that's, you just focus on that next thing, right? That's kind of one of the principles of resilience, is breaking things down. What needs to be done next? How prepared am I for this scenario if the best case happens, if the worst case happens? And, if you love that kind of thing, it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. And also that the ability to endure and that resilience that you're talking about. I mean, you touched on a couple very interesting kind of cornerstone mindset pieces and mentality and the resilience, being able to be comfortable under pressure, being able to work well with other team members. If you were to if there was a young, let's say a young female who wanted to see a path like yours, and you wanted to teach her some life lessons and some skills and things like that probably aren't taught in school, what would be the things that you think would be important for a young explorer to really get under their belt and be able to have as a mindset or a skill set to be able to achieve as much as you've been able to do?
That's a great question. I think the number one thing is just aim to be the hardest working person of anyone you know. Just because a work ethic is free, it's not something you're born with or not. It's something you can work to develop, and it's something to aspire to be the hardest working person in a room. And then for females or underrepresented groups in particular, I would say act like you belong there, because you do, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because I think that's been a huge part of why maybe we see underrepresentation in some of the fields we've been talking about. And then in a broader term, for anyone who's setting out, ask questions, question everything, say, why does this have to be like this? How can it be better? How can I make it better? And then, what would it be like if it was better? What is my role in making this better? Take that power back and, apply your smart brains towards solving hard problems.
That's awesome. And I mean, you look at those, there's amazing things, the hardest working thing, which will get you to accomplish a lot, then the questioning, which will expand what's possible, and then, that sense of just feeling comfortable. I've stepped into new professions, not as nearly as many as you have, but I've stepped into situations where I felt like a fraud going into one situation. I'm like, what am I even doing here? This doesn't make sense. Because I've had large jumps from one occupation, being a serial entrepreneur, from one thing, that's I feel like a fraud. And then one day I look back and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm a seasoned veteran, and then I look back and I'm like, oh, wow, how did that happen? And there's this weird thing of this imposter syndrome that happens in the beginning. And then until you finally look back, and at some point it just becomes everyday kind of activities, which I think there's a very valuable lesson of that, being doing it before you're comfortable, right? And you're talking about being
Yeah, that's so true. And so, every single one of us feels that imposter syndrome, like, hey, I'm not good enough to be there, especially the first day of medical school, when you're there, you're like, okay, there's been a mistake. How did I get in? Because everyone's incredible, right? You're, in medical school these days, your colleagues can be Olympic athletes, or they may have won Shark Tank. And, those are real examples that we see in Canadian medical schools. But, on the flip side, it's sort of like, coming back to this imposter syndrome, I was once giving a keynote, and I asked the room of people, and they were all very accomplished. They were all heads of science centers from across the country. I said, who here has never felt the imposter syndrome? Nobody raised their hand. Everyone feels it. So the question is, how do we deal with it? And there's two approaches, and I think the first one is one that you touched on, is saying, well, someone believed in me enough to put me here, so I guess I'm here now. Better make the most of it. And that's an approach that I've taken lots, because I've been asked to do really amazing things with respect to space medicine research, and it's like, but there's so many better people. But okay, I guess it's me now. And then the other part of it is just, dissecting those feelings and, saying, okay, well, why am I feeling this way? What is that feeling? Do I feel like I'm not smart enough? Okay, why? Is it because I don't study enough? Is it true? Okay, then I'll just study more. If it's not true, well, then that voice needs to go away and I'll just move on. So I think analyzing those feelings can also be helpful.
That's awesome. And that the analyzing the feelings is incredible, because you start looking at it, you go, okay, is it something I need to change? Is there something I can do to change it? If not, I'm just going to let go of that. I'm just going to carry on with what I got going on with myself, which is incredible. And that ability to switch between those two roles, that ability to switch from the explorer that's running into the wilds or into the forest or wherever you might be exploring, to the planner, the person who's laying down the tracks, the person who's organizing, the person who's keeping things to, like, okay, I'm going to come up with my spreadsheets and my data analysis and my charts and in that mode, and then switching gears into the explorer mode. They're two very different mindsets to be in. Do you have a pattern? Is it a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a yearly cadence for goal setting, for planning, for things? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's this principle I use. It's called a rate of scan, and it's something that I picked up when I was flying, skydiving, diving. And the idea is you want to maintain this situational awareness. And so, when you're piloting a plane, you're always looking at the world around you. You're looking at your instrument panel, and you're also looking at your map. And the idea is you want to see where you are in relation to where you've been and what is your progress to get there. And it's the exact same concept if you're driving a car. You're constantly looking ahead of you. You're looking in the rearview mirror. You're looking at your dashboard and your gas tank. And it's the same thing with goals. You can create your immediate term, short-term, intermediate term, long-term goals. And the idea is you don't just write it once and forget about them. You're also always, constantly scanning between them, saying, okay, where did I start out? Where am I now? And what is my progress to where I want to be? And then the other part of that is, has anything changed? Have my values changed? Are my goals not as important to me? Or, is it more important than ever? So just kind of always maintaining that situational awareness to have the presence of mind to keep that immediate term view as well as the long-term focus has really helped me out.
And is that something that you do daily or weekly? Or we're talking about, it makes sense. Or you have where you want to go, where you're at now, where you've been, you're looking through that and you're saying, okay, am I still in alignment with where I want to go? The congruencies, right? And you're talking about looking at it frequently. Like, I mean, I'm curious about that habit. Like, what is the trigger for that? Is that I roll out of bed, I look at my goals, I hit the ground running, ready, set, go? Or Sunday, I sip my coffee in my bed while I pet my cat and I look at my goals on a giant whiteboard? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm still playing around with this formula, because the most recent thing I've started to do is say, okay, how diligent can I be about this? And I actually started up a spreadsheet, of course, to look at what's on my radar with respect to my pilot's license, with respect to what I'm getting done, in terms of my fitness goals, in terms of learning Russian, and how much time am I dedicating to that every single day? And then that actually turned out to be quite rigid. Actually putting down the exact minute amount was sort of like, what's the point? Like, I would rather just say I dedicated time to Russian today and that was a good day, rather than saying I did 20 minutes of Russian. So I'm still playing around with that formula. And then there's also certain adjunct tools, because I have so many different schedules and so many different worlds. Every single night before I go to bed, I have to look at both of my calendars, and then also when I wake up, and just make sure I'm aware of what the day is going to hold. And then also to-do lists, just keeping both a written and a digital to-do list of, what needs to be done today, what needs to be done this week. So the summary is, a lot of planning. So tracking, spreadsheets, to-do lists, calendars.
That's fantastic. And thank you for elaborating on that. That's very helpful, and it helps me kind of wrap my mind around, because you're someone you've done a bunch of amazing shit. Okay. And a lot of people look at you like, how do you do it? Right. And part of the thing is the being able to set a plan for it. And then another one is being able to work the plan. And they're not the same skill set. Some people can just go. right? And they just go into a direction and they're off in the woods and they get lost. And sometimes they make it out and sometimes they die, right? And other people make giant plans. They make mountains out of molehills. And then they're just sitting there. They have all these spreadsheets, but they never take action. And so I'm truly trying to understand, in terms of your ability to accomplish as much as you've done, it's a mindset and a skill set, along with the habits that kind of organize what you've been able to do and make these things happen. And so thank you for entertaining me on these questions, because I'm trying to, understand how you've been able to go along this journey, from the inspiration along the ways that, what are those daily habit patterns that keep you moving along.
So on that note, though, I think there's two important distinctions that need to be made, because for me, it's not sort of like, I'm going to plan this out, then I'll do it. For me, it's more that impatience that I'm not doing as much as I think I can be doing. Let's put the metrics behind this. So that's kind of, I would say, the driver to why I started that spreadsheet. It's sort of like, okay, come on, these are the things that need to be done this year, right? The pilot's license I want to have done this year, right? So that's, why I started tracking how much time I'm dedicating to that. And then the other part of it is, we've talked simply about me and my approach this hour, but the other part of it is, I would not be where I am without having incredible teams who help me out every single day, whether it's, my family who's incredibly supportive, whether it's the support staff in the hospital who make sure, they're like, hey, doctor, you've been going straight for 14 hours. Have you eaten or drank? Go eat or drink, right? Or, the teams who make the Neptune expedition happen. Like, it's none of that is simply me in isolation. It's also being lucky enough to have those catalysts in place.
100%. Your environment is so important. And so important that the ecosystem of the people to be around you and be able to make those things happen. You didn't build the rocket, you're just flying it, So it's still incredible to look at as an accomplishment of being able to do those things, because it's still, you could have all those elements and still be in a struggling situation where you're given everything and you still take it for granted. What I'm also curious about, you have this hunger, right? You said this again, like, you're like, I still feel like I'm not doing enough, right? Which makes me go, I feel like I've done some stuff, and I look around and go, no, I look at it. So what's the hunger? Like, where does this hunger come from? Like, what's with the, I feel like I haven't done enough. I need to track my 20 minutes of Russian on top of everything else that I'm doing. Like, what does the genesis from that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the coolest part about setting these goals and paths for yourself as a kid, and then realizing that as an adult, I get to do all of this and so much more. That is an incredible feeling. Like, holy cow, I get to work in space and space medicine and develop technology and write research papers. Like, I never imagined I would get to do all of that. So that's part of that hunger. And then the other part of that is, when you are able to land amongst people who are just like you, equally driven, and you're inspired by everything they do within their own fields. You're like, how are you doing so much? I need to do more with my life. And then, there's also a lot of things that, get me fired up. And, there's a couple of speeches out there that just I love. And one of them is the Gene Kranz flight director speech, after the Apollo 1 fire that claimed the lives of Grissom, White, and Chaffee. And, just talking about accountability, talking about how anything that happens, the buck stops with you. Another one, a friend of mine who's in the special operations world is, I think it's from the Dead Poets Society. He said, it's, got to do more, be more, and on days, when it's sort of like, hey, the grind isn't enough. It's like, no, I got to do more, be more. And then the one I've started listening to most recently, I think a lot of your listeners will really relate to, when I'm at the gym working out, it's that Rocky, that speech that Stallone gives to his son. And it's sort of like, it's so good. He says, he's like, you want to get what you're worth, then go get what you're worth. But, don't blame it on him or her or anybody. Cowards do that. And that ain't you. That is so true. It gets you fired up, and it tells you no one's going to drag you up. No one's going to drag you up, but you have to bring yourself up.
I love that. That is my get your butt out of bed. It's time to make, big stuff happen. Let's go. And that, but you're right. Cause cause like we everybody can slip into the victim mode, or I'm doing enough mode, or I'm doing those types of things. But like, I felt like that came from Stallone's soul. Like, and he came out and said that, because it was, you feel that. And you're right that those items of inspiration is like sources, like it's like an engine that helps you kind of get to where you want to go. And it's kind of cool to see. It's actually cool to me to see that you're listening to the same things that I'm listening to. I'm sure millions of other people are listening to the same type of thing, but it's cool to see that we all kind of pull on the same sources to get us going. And because everybody needs that, whether it's someone going into space, or a mom of 10 kids, which I can't imagine what that life's like, how challenging that is. And,
I
God
can't
bless her.
either.
Like my grandma had 13 kids. It's like, oh my God, how'd you do it? You deserve several medals. Good job. Yeah. And so the inspiration's great. And you're talking about these things about making these plans and, being supported. Is there, for all the things that you've done and all the places you've been to and all the goals that you have, do you have like a holy grail, or do you have like a flag in the top of the mountain? Is there a place that is like the big thing you're trying to accomplish?
Oh gosh, yeah, I would say the personal would be getting to space, and then the legacy that I'd like to leave is in remote and austere environment medicine. So, contributing to the foundations of space medicine on the moon, Mars, and beyond, helping keep future astronauts safe for the long term. Maybe there's going to be a first hospital on Europa somewhere in the deep solar system. That would be cool. But also bringing those benefits back to Earth, because, we were talking about how remote you can be on this planet and, still be on this planet. And it's crazy to me that because it takes almost 17 hours to safely decompress from the Aquarius reef base, you can actually get to Earth quicker from the International Space Station than you can from 60 feet underwater. That's crazy. There's a Chilean settlement outside of Antarctica. It's called the King George Island. And it is so remote that anyone over the age of 6 living there has to have their appendix out because they're so far from medical care, right? And so, to be able to contribute to helping keeping those populations with the standard of care, whether it's in Antarctica, whether it's on Mars, that would be my legacy that I'm aspiring towards.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, because there's the personal satisfaction, right? There's the personal joy, which is floating in space, flying in space. And I just, give me some of that. That sounds incredible. Then the impact, the legacy, the contribution, right? Because they don't have to be one and the exact same thing. And I could see how both would be so impactful. And I mean, that's a wonderful mission and vision that you have. What's the dragon? What's the thing that is so difficult to overcome? You don't know if you're able to do it, and you feel like you might need to die, be reborn, or transform who you are to get to where you need to go.
I haven't found it yet. I mean, for me, it's not, I can't do this. It's more like, okay, well, when are you going to be able to prioritize this and, give this all that, it merits, if I'm going to set out to climb Everest, then, that means that I have to make a plan to train for Everest. I need to put the resources, the money, and the team there. That's the only thing that would be stopping me from climbing Everest. And, what is my Everest? Right now it's space, but I would say that, for anything that I'm trying to overcome, it's where am I going to put my resources, my time, and my will.
That's awesome. It's interesting because on the Heroes Journey podcast, I like to ask certain questions of patterns and behaviors and stuff like that on, the Holy Grail. And I've never heard someone say that they haven't found the dragon. That's the first time I've heard that in like 100 plus podcasts here of people saying, I doesn't exist. If I have the time, I'll make it happen, which is awesome. And it says a lot to your ability to kind of be able to go past these things. And you don't look at them as dragons. You more look at them as it just takes time and resources and energies to sort out the problems, and anything is quite achievable. So I love it. And this has been incredible. With all of that being said, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before they tell them how to get a hold of you?
No, I'm just curious to see where people end up from your podcast. Where are they starting out from? What are they, what are their dragons to slay? I'd love to hear about it. So yeah, thank you so much for this incredible conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And this great thing. I mean, for the people that listen to it, please post in the comments in the different places below on, what is your mission? What is your dragon? Where are you going? And, what inspiration did you get from this, and lessons taken away? Because there's a lot of amazing insights in here. And, Doctor, this has been wonderful. It's been amazing. If people want to find more about you, look up some of the amazing stuff that you're up to, how do they do that?
Yeah, great. You can find me on my website, shawnapandya.com. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Shawna Pandya. Just Google that, and it's pretty much the same everywhere. And so looking forward to connecting.
Awesome. Have a blessed and beautiful day. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. And I will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care now. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.